Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering each and every week. We are sponsored by Blake, the attorney Maislin, and we'll talk about local topics of interest in sports. We've got maybe a national topic or two, especially this week. We've certainly got a couple of Ask Any Anything questions to get to as well. And one thing I know is this, Rick, is neither one of us need an interpreter to admit we've lost a couple of shekels on a game.
That's right. Although Pete Rose, what a great moment that was. Pete Rose coming in and saying, if I would have an interpreter, Dude, what a moment on social media.
I thought that was listen, Pete's a polarizing guy. And I was probably one of the few in town that beat the drum that he was lying all along about gambling on baseball. And I took shots for it. That's fine. But I got to be honest, I thought that was one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. And I literally laughed out loud for 5 minutes at that because he's right. There's some truth to that, right?
Yeah. Shame on me for not having that video ready to go here. That was a great moment this week on social media.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of the Reds, let's jump right into our topics here because we are just one day away from opening day as we're recording this, Skinny. We're going to get into all the excitement of opening day and what we think is going to happen this season. But first, we've got to start off with the news of the day, and it's some bad news for Reds fans. Matt McLain had successful surgery on Tuesday to address cartilage damage and repair his labrum in his left shoulder. An exact timeline is still to be determined as it has a wide range of possibilities. The Reds hope to have Matt back this season. That was a release from the team earlier today on Wednesday. We've already talked about Matt McLain, how big of impact we thought he could have on this team. Now, him being gone for an indefinite period of time, that's a real blow before the start of the season.
It is, and he's probably one of my favorite players. He's just one of those guys. He just does everything so well with gap power. Even power, can run the bases, play two key infield spots for you. Just seems to be one of those guys you're going to look up at the end of the year for 10 years, and he's going to have the same numbers: 100 and some odd runs scored, 75 RBI, 20 homers, 35 doubles, 25 steals. It's just literally every year is almost going to look the same. He's that kind of guy, in my opinion, and it's a loss. I will say it is softened somewhat by having a guy who's been there, done that, in Jonathan India. He is a career 750 OPS guy. It's not great. Matt McLain was in the 800s last year. If you were to give me which one would I start over the other at this stage, I'd start Matt McLain over Jonathan India. But they do get a little lucky that they didn't, and maybe this was by default. Maybe this was by choice that he's a leader in the clubhouse. Maybe this was by the market wasn't there. But the fact they didn't just rush to move Jonathan India, that they were going to look for other spots for him to play perhaps, was really wise on Nick Kral's part.
I mean, seriously, think about what this offseason has now turned into. This lead up to the opening day has become Noelvi Marte's suspension, this injury to McLain. We've had a few other more minor things along the way as well that haven't turned out to be as big maybe. But Skinny, really, they almost look like geniuses. And in the moment, they didn't necessarily know this was all going to happen, right, but they almost look brilliant for keeping the extra depth around in this infield.
Yeah, I could even argue, I think Noelvi Marte's a professional hitter. I think he's another guy that you're going to look up, and he's going to be so consistent every year. Depending on how lineup construction went as the year went along, I could argue that somehow, some way, however you wanted to mix it, TJ Friedl, Matt McLain, and Noelvi Marte will be batting 1, 2, 3 in your order at some point this year. So you're taking really a big three guys out of the lineup, but to have a fallback in India, to have a fallback in Jim or Candelario, to kind of even have a fallback with the platoon possibility of Stuart Fairchild and Will Benson. I don't think it's perfect. It certainly doesn't help your defense because TJ Friedl covered up some mistakes out there. But you could be in worse places in other years where you were hoping to scratch together a lineup of 8 or 9 guys, and maybe 3 of those guys were in there by default, and the bench was a bunch of Kevin Newmans. You didn't have that. You had some real legit guys you can plug into those spots.
I think the most frustrating part of all this to me is, had you asked me a few weeks ago, who are you most excited about for opening day? Who are you most excited about coming into the season? I would have probably told you Matt McLain and Noelvi Marte were the 2 guys I was most excited to see this year. So from that standpoint, maybe that's more of a personal thing than it is fan base wide. It's really putting a damper on the start of the season. And I will admit that, I am happy that they have the depth. I do think they can maybe play to a respectable record over the next month as they wait to get some of these guys back. And we'll talk about some of the pitching stuff that they're dealing with as well as they wait to get Nick Lodolo back. I hope they can keep this thing rolling. I am pretty optimistic about that still, but it definitely lessens the excitement for watching this team play, because I was really excited about those two guys specifically.
Yeah, and I understand that. It's certainly, on paper, this team, when it was at full strength, I legitimately think was among the best in the National League. And now I'm hoping Jonathan India is the Rookie of the Year, Jonathan India. I'm hoping that the platoon in center field works out. I'm hoping Jeimer Candelario isn't at a stage of his career or age-wise that he takes a quick, deep regression, right? So, and as you know, hope is never a great plan, and that's what it feels like. I'm hoping for those things. Again, you could be in much worse spot. You could be having to plug in Kevin Newman in the starting lineup and grabbing a guy from AAA that really isn't, is a 4A player. Jonathan India is a legit major leaguer. Jeimer Candelario is a legit major leaguer. I think Will Benson proved that. I'm still iffy on Stuart Fairchild. But again, to your point, you're losing out on three legitimate guys.
Yeah, I mean, last year for opening day, we were trying to get excited about Jonathan India as one of the stars of the team alongside Jason Vossler. So we're in a better spot now than we were on last year's opening day, without question.
Yeah, the Jason Vossler train rolled along for about a week. It was really cute until it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the Matt McLain injury news. The other bit of news that we've got is Nick Lodolo, the injury update. He is scheduled to be activated on April 10th. He will pitch in a minor league spring training game next Tuesday. Then he'll make 2 AAA rehab starts before his return date with the major league team on April 10th that I just mentioned. Again, Skinny, I think we've talked about Lodolo enough that we don't have to hit on this too much, but I guess overall pretty good news that it sounds like he will be back with the major league team sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and it's going to make them make a hard decision on what to do in the rotation, right? Because Nick Martinez kind of pitched his way into it when it looked like he was probably going to be a bullpen arm. Maybe that puts pressure on Andrew Abbott's first start for it to be a good one. Maybe it doesn't even matter either way. Maybe the plan is to move Martinez back to the bullpen, but it's one of the good problems now that they're going to have when Nick Lodolo comes back, and they're going to have to make a decision in the rotation. And it's not just, hey, let's go get Connor Overton. Let's go throw Luis Sessa into the mix. No, you're taking what I could argue when he's at his best is their best pitcher and plugging him back into your rotation.
All right, Skinny, let's go ahead and get into just like the season preview superlative stuff that we always do this time of year. We'll start with the Reds record. What do you think about the win total? This is obviously always a popular bet. I believe it's at 83.5 wins right now for the Reds currently. Where do you have this Reds team finishing?
Yeah, I still have, even with the injuries, I have it going over. I did a prediction column, and I had them at 89 wins. I mean, let's not forget this team started 21-29. They finished 61-51 the rest of the way after they called their guys up from the minors. And I know you're missing one of those in Matt McLain and another one, Noel De Marte. But they went out and made some offseason moves to make this team better. So even if you played this team at the 61-51 winning percentage clip, Rick, that gets you to 89 wins. And so I think I actually picked at 80. No, I think I did go way down. I
think you did 88.
Yeah, 88. So I did have 80.
Yeah.
But yeah, to my point, if you just do what they did over the 112 games to finish last year, that's an 89 win team. And I don't think this team is worse off despite the injuries.
Yeah, the way I looked at this was I have a lot of excitement about this group. I'm hoping all these young guys that we saw come up last year, and I mean, even guys like a Spencer Steer, a TJ Friedel, who they had a great season and they're a little bit more experienced, but at the end of it, these are still guys that have done it for basically 1 year at this point in terms of proving themselves as a legit bona fide starter that you're going to be excited about going forward. So there's a part of me that's like really excited about all these guys, thinking this could be an extremely deep team with a lot of young talent, could be one of the best teams in baseball a year from now. There's also a side of me that's terribly afraid that with some of these early injuries going on, some of these guys may hit a natural regression, that they're not going to be as good as we think they're going to be, or they take a step back from last year, and this thing could really spiral quickly, and all of a sudden this team isn't nearly what we thought it was going to be midway through the year. I have both of those feelings going on right now, and where I settle with my prediction is somewhere right in between. I ended up going with this team won 82 games last year, and they finished 2 games short of making the playoffs, Skinny. Had they won 84, they would have been in there. That's where I think they'll be this year. I think they'll be 2 wins better. They'll be at 84 wins. I think we're going to have a rocky start. There's going to be some hand-wringing. The fan base is going to be losing it. And then it's going to be kind of like last year where they start playing well. We see the young players getting excitement going again, and they battle their way into the playoffs. They sneak into the playoffs. And then after that, who knows what happens with this group. But I do think this team will sneak into the playoffs.
Yeah, I will say, we've talked about the injuries and how it affects this team because it's obviously offense related. But it's kind of time for some of these pitchers to step up and be what we think they can be too, right? You're allowed. Last I checked, and you're allowed to win games 2-1. They let you win. Literally, they will. If you score 2, the other team scores 1. They do give you a win for that. So, some of this too is that the rotation needs to be what we think it's going to be and has the potential to be.
Skinny, that's a really good point. Because if you remember going back to last year, I think our biggest conversation was about the excitement of getting to watch these 2 potential young aces in Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo, along with some of the other young guys that were coming, maybe like a Graham Ashcraft, who obviously finished the season really well. So that was the excitement going into last year. Then it became, once the young guys started coming up, it became all about the young position players and all the talent and the prospects. So this year now we've switched all our excitement to that side of it, but it's like, what happens if Lodolo and Green kind of come into their own and they are healthy and they're great? And then you even have a couple more young guys in Ashcraft and Abbott who look like they potentially could be top of the rotation type guys, and 2s or 3s even. So that is one part about this season that may be underrated right now by Reds fans, is how good this pitching rotation still could be if it clicks.
And Frankie Montas is at the top of that rotation, right? And if he's healthy, he's had years when he's healthy and he's been really, really good. So you add that to the mix. So yeah, I think that's probably overlooked because again, the offensive excitement last year was a lot of fun. And what they did, and we were looking for all those guys back, and now that some of them are not, it's a bit disappointing. But to my point, again, this rotation was kind of the focal point for a bit. Why can't it be again?
Yeah, I totally agree with that take. Who would be your MVP pick of the year for the Reds, Skinny?
Spencer Steer. Listen. I know people can probably look and go, he's going to take a step backwards, the sophomore slump, all of those things. I don't. I just think he's a legit player. He had 23 home runs last year, 37 doubles. I think he's got the potential as you start to rise through your 20s and your power potential goes up a little bit. He turns some of those doubles into homers. I mean, I think he's a legit 30 home run, 100 RBI guy in the middle of your lineup. And then, again, part of the value of him is the ability to put him in left, put him at third, put him at second, put him at first. I mean, the fact that he can move all over. And I made the point in the column of, maybe him just being static. Let's just say he plays most of his time in left field and occasionally fills into the other spots. Maybe that even improves his offense more, that he knows every day I'm just going out to left field. I don't have to worry about today I'm the third baseman. Today I'm the second. Maybe he doesn't worry about any of that stuff, but I do think that can affect your offense some. And, being in left field, it's not the most taxing defensive position, and maybe that helps his offense too. So to me, it's Spencer Steer. Who you got?
If Matt McClain was healthy, that was going to be my pick. I was really excited about Matt McClain coming into this year. Now that's all thrown out the window. I'm going to go with CES. I think that his power numbers are going to be there almost regardless. He may go through slumps. He may have strikeout issues, whatever. I don't know what he's going to hit percentage-wise, batting average-wise, but I do know that he's going to have the power numbers. He's going to hit the ball out of the ballpark. He's going to drive in some runs. I think he's going to be a key cog in the middle of the lineup for the team this year.
Yeah, I had him as my offensive breakout player. And C. Trent Rosecrans from The Athletic and I did an interview at WVXU to kind of preview the season. And I can't remember how the question was phrased, but it was something along those lines of who's a player that we should look to have a big season that's maybe off the radar. And I said CES, and I thought I looked at Trent out of the corner of my eyes, and I thought he was about to roll his eyes at me. And actually, he reemphasized the point. He said, he said, before spring training, I really wasn't sure about him. He said, but man, watching him in spring training and then talking to people about, kind of his approach and everything, he goes, I think he's going to have a great season. So, and if you look, the guy's hit everywhere from college to every level of the minors. Even last year, I mean, the average was only 270, and I think he has a 300 hitter potential. But boy, the last month, go look at those last month numbers. The slash line puts him over 1,000 OPS. He hit 8 home runs. His spring training numbers were off the charts in 51 at bats, 2 doubles, 3 triples, 5 homers, and 51 at bats. And yeah, I know it's spring and all those things. This guy he's just a natural hitter. And I think, the 270, I think, was probably a little adjustment period for him. And once he got adjusted, i.e. late in the season, you saw what he can do.
Yeah, I think so too. And I will say for our listeners out there who like to rip on me, go easy on the percentage versus average thing. I've been talking college basketball for like 7 months straight, so I've got to get back into baseball mode here as we switch gears.
Technically, it can be a percentage. I mean, if you hit 330, it means you're hitting 33% of the time. I mean,
that is a percentage, but let's face it, Skinny, sports guys are going to get on me for that one, and deservedly so. You can't say percentage instead of batting average.
Just as long as you don't call runs points, I'm good with it.
The Reds need to score some more points than they did last year. That's for sure. Skinny, who do you have as the Reds' best pitcher going into this year?
Yeah, I went with breakout pitcher, but to me, it's Graham Ashcraft. The last 12 starts for him last year, he had a 2.58 ERA and a very low WHIP. Was just consistent. He went his last 12 starts, every one of those was 5 innings plus, a chunk of them 7 innings plus. He led the staff in quality starts with 15. The next closest was Andrew Abbott at 9. Unless his mechanics and things are thrown off because of the foot surgery, and I don't think they would be. I guess it's possible, but I don't think it would be. I think he picks up where he left off last year. For whatever reason, the light bulb went on for that dude. And it wasn't just a couple of starts. It wasn't just 4. 12 starts is a nice sample size to be as consistent as he was consistent. In those 12 starts, didn't give up more than 3 earned runs in any of those starts. That's pretty damn consistent by Major League Baseball standards.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you want the answer to this question to be Hunter Green or Nick Lodolo. Sure. Because those are the two most talented guys. And if they're coming along, it really knocks everyone else down a peg and makes your overall rotation stronger. I don't think that's probably going to be the case. I think it's more likely that it'll be Montas or maybe Abbott or Ashcraft. If it's Abbott or Ashcraft, I think you still feel pretty good about it. The concern comes in if Montas is just the guy and everyone else is kind of middling and not quite catching on the way we had hoped they would. That's my big concern. I hope Montas isn't clearly this team's best pitcher going into this year.
Yeah, I will say this, because I think Nick Lodolo, if healthy, I think he's showed that. Like, I think his stuff is just dynamite.
Did you see Jonathan India's comments about his stuff?
I did not.
Yeah, he said that he felt that he was clearly, when he's healthy, he's clearly the best pitcher on the team and has Cy Young award winner stuff. He says just electric. I
don't think it's hyperbole. I will say this, and again, I'm going to withhold judgment because I think that's the fair thing to do. But we aren't at the stage anymore with Hunter Green of the potential, the talk of his potential and what he might be. It's time to be what we think you can be. Listen, I don't need you to be Justin Verlander overnight, but you need to be more of a version of what you're supposed to be than what you at sometimes aren't. Am I right or wrong?
I totally agree with that. And that's why you cannot convince me that him not being the opening day starter is not some type of message from the team to that point of like, hey, you got to get it together here. You're still kind of doing the same stuff that we've been doing for a couple of years now. And I know you were coming back from an injury, and I know you were a young guy, and I know we were putting a lot of pressure on you and a lot of expectations, but we paid you. You got your money. We put a lot of faith into you. Now it's time to show up and be the ace of this staff. And I'm with you. I'm hoping he's going to take a step towards that this year. He doesn't necessarily have to be a dominant ace, but he needs to look like a reliable top of the rotation starter. And to this point, he hasn't been that. He's shown flashes of it, but he's been way too inconsistent.
And I know I'm throwing throwing things way over my skis on this one. But honestly, if he doesn't show that, Rick, on a consistent basis, I think at some point you have to have the conversation of, okay, maybe he's better served as a closer. I mean that.
I mean, fair enough. At the end of the day, the thing about his contract was it wasn't really that expensive.
No, right.
They signed him up early before he was going to cost him a ton. And by today's dollar amounts, it's not that much for a pitcher.
No, and if he became a dominant closer on that contract, I'd be fine with it.
Yeah, and that's why I think you have the flexibility to do that. I don't think his contract was prohibitive to where you go, no, you're paying him starter money. He's got to be a starter. Closers are getting pretty good dollars too.
I mean, let's not forget, Aroldis Chapman was supposed to be a starter. That's what he was supposed to be. And he became one of the dominant closers of his era, and it worked out for everybody.
Now, when you have that type of fastball where you can touch the triple digits easily, it gives you that ability when the team's not going to see you multiple times. They're only going to see you once through the lineup. It makes it a lot easier to throw that gas and just blow them away.
And hey, listen, like I said, I could be way over the skis on that. I hope I am. I mean, I hope he's closer to eventually a Justin Verlander starter than he is anything else. But I think it's time to stop talking about potential with him, and it's time to go do it.
I think a lot of Reds fans feel the same way about Hunter Green at this point. Skinny, give me a surprise player this year.
I'm going to go Will Benson. And, it looked like last year when he started, remember, he was just a disaster. And if you look, you're like, well, if you combine this with what he did in Cleveland, maybe he just can't hit major league pitching. One thing that going into last year, and I can't remember where I read this or noted, I actually saw this last year, was if you looked at him at every level, like one year in Class A, he was okay. Then the next year he crushed it. Then 1 year in AA, then he crushed it. Then AAA, and then he crushed it. So then he came to the majors, and you think, okay, well, he didn't have much success in Cleveland, didn't have a lot of at-bats. And then when he didn't crush it, you're like, okay, this is a 4A guy. But boy, as last year went along, that dude got it done. And I don't know. Again, I think it probably is going to be a platoon situation, but I do think they need to throw him in there some against lefties to see if he can do it. And if he can, maybe he's the everyday guy out in center field or maybe even on occasionally to a corner outfield spot. But I just thought as last year progressed, he showed he more than belonged here.
I think he fits with this team perfectly too, because they have that young, doing all the rowing the boat stuff. So all the exciting stuff and camaraderie stuff that they like to do. He kind of has that like big play potential for a baseball player. Like there aren't a lot of guys you'd say that about in baseball, but feels like when he does positive things, they are loud positive things that make a big impact in a game or kind of flashy. I feel like he's kind of a momentum guy that gets this team going. He fits well with them. The triples, the run of the bases stuff that he does. I think he fits really well. I like him too. In terms of the surprise guy for this team, man, that is a really tough question. I don't know. I've got a disappointment for you, and I think it's mostly because of injury. I think TJ Friedl is just kind of doomed this year to start. He had such a great season last year. I was a little concerned about whether or not it'd be sustainable coming back this year. And then now that he's going to be out with, I mean, they're saying potentially only 6 weeks after he had the injury, but Skinny, I'm worried about how TJ Friedl is going to bounce back and get going this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think anytime something like that, it's obviously come back from a wrist. How does it heal? How do you come back from it? How are your mechanics at the plate because of it? And maybe he's one of those guys that won't affect him one iota. And that would be the hope. I'm not sure I can label him in that category, but I understand where you're coming from with it.
Yeah, I guess maybe disappointment's the wrong word, but biggest concern right now, because you labeled him and Matt McClain as the heart and soul of this offense last year when things were going well. And that was like such a good way to say it, because it felt like they kind of drove this team, and Friedl did so many things well, so consistently last year.
That against righties and lefties.
Yeah, it just feels like if you don't have that guy setting the table like he did last year, this team could take a step back, and they're not going to have him to start the season. If he has a slow progression to get back and get up to speed once he gets back, we could be midway through the season before he's kind of getting back into the flow.
Yeah, I mean, a Jonathan India, Ellie De La Cruz, top of the order, has a chance to do some really special things, and it also has a chance to make a lot of outs.
It does. All right, Skinny, so work backwards here for me. We'll wrap it up with this, our red segment. What is the storyline? What is the narrative going to be after the end of this season? What will we be saying about this team?
It's an ascending team that got a cup of coffee in the playoffs and is built for longer term success. I think that truly is where we're going to go. I know the sophomore slump is a real thing. I just don't think all of those guys are going to do it. I think a guy like Encarnacion-Strand is just too good of a hitter to have any kind of regression. Ellie is certainly the wild card, right? I could give you a 232 Ellie, and I could give you a 265 Ellie. I said on the interview with Trent, I said, if you can get him to somewhere around 270, 275, and he stopped me short. He goes, that's a 40-40 guy, maybe even a 50-50 guy. I go, all right, so maybe I'm a little more with that. So I'll go with 250 Ellie. He goes, and a 250 Ellie will do special things. And he's right. I mean, that's the funny part. I mean, even if you look at last year, for as much as he had some issues at the plate, he still had a plus 700 OPS. I mean, he still was a pretty damn good player. We all remember the unicorn moments, and those are things you can't forget. But he also had some low lows. But even then, you look, you go, it's not a bad season at all.
Yeah, kudos to us for not talking about Ellie basically that whole time while we were just doing this preview. We barely brought him up, which is a crazy thing to think about given how he took all of Major League Baseball by storm last year when he came up and he was doing the things that he was doing.
Because I think as a fan base, you're holding your breath that this is not going to pop in our face. I really do. Because we saw all the crazy stuff when he first came up, and you still see it. I mean, the 470-foot home run in spring training. But then we also saw some of the lows with him at the plate, and you go, he's got some real holes he's got to fix. Is he going to fix them?
The excitement has definitely worn off. The flashiness of all the crazy things he can do has worn off. And you're right. It feels like a lot of Reds fans are walking on eggshells when it comes to Ellie because no one wants to say that he's a bust, and they shouldn't. It'd be insane to be calling this guy a bust this early. That is stupid when people say that. But I think everyone is getting to the point where they are starting to worry, like, are we going to have to eat crow and realize at some point that this guy could be a bust? And again, we're not there yet, but the concerns are there. So it's going to be a huge year for Ellie. The one thing, though, to your point about him kind of like having a bigger year, and like go back and look at the all-star race for shortstops. He's right there. Like, he's right there. Not far off the top shortstop, which is crazy to think. Honestly, it makes me think the shortstop talent in baseball isn't very good right now. But, I mean, he is right there in terms of his productivity.
Yeah, I actually picked all-stars, too, guys. I thought that would make the all-star team from the Reds, and I picked 3 guys. Alexis Diaz, who didn't have a very good spring, but and I know he didn't have a very good end of the year last year, but I think he ran into a little bit of a brick wall, and I take spring training numbers with a grain of salt. I had Alexis Diaz, Steer, and I had Ellie De La Cruz for that reason. I think Ellie is going to have a good enough first half. He's going to have enough highlight moments that voters are going to vote for him when they look and go, Dansby Swanson, Orlando Arcia, and whatever other shortstop you want to name. He's got numbers as good, and I see him making all these plays. I'm voting for him. It wouldn't shock me to see him get voted in as a starter.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. He has the star potential, the name. Like, kids know who he is. Like, he is going to get votes. There's no doubt about that. So that's not a bad pick right there. And to your point about the overall narrative after the season, that's exactly where I'm at. I think we're going to be talking about this team made the playoffs. They avoided a disaster. They made the playoffs. Everyone's happy with that. But everyone's ready for the next step, and they want to see them move forward as a real contender going into the 2025 season. All right, let's switch gears here, Skinny. College basketball time, March Madness. We're moving into the second weekend. We have a great Sweet 16 ahead of us on Thursday and Friday. But first, we got to talk about the local disaster that was last Thursday night. Kentucky was upset by Oakland 80-76 in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Since then, UK fans have been on fire. They've been lighting up the phone lines of KSR and Matt Jones' Twitter spaces and every other social media feed available. John Calipari showed up. He did his radio show on Monday night with Tom Leach.
Did you listen? I listened. Did you listen to it?
Too.
Yeah, I did too.
He sounded confident about his future at the university. And then on Tuesday, Kentucky Athletic Director Mitch Barnhart tweeted the following. He said, quote, "As we normally do at the end of every season, Coach Cal and I have had conversations about the direction of our men's basketball program, and I can confirm that he will return for his 16th season as our head coach." So, Skinny, we'll start it there. Is Kentucky making the right decision by bringing John Calipari back next year?
By the way, before I answer that question, I'm playing pickup ball at the Y this afternoon with a guy named Jack Golke and a guy who wore number 45 for BYU. He's kind of a big, heavy-set center that really doesn't do anything other than set screens. We're all going to be playing a pickup game up at the Y today. You want to join?
No, I think I'm good, but I can believe that. I have no doubt that that's what he's headed towards next.
Exactly. I don't think it's the right decision, Rick, and especially if they had the money. And I'm still iffy on that. I know there were reports that they were going to find a way to get the buyout. It wasn't a $33 million lump sum. There was going to be installments. They were going to figure out a way, and they had a way to make those installments, etc. If you had the funding lined up, what is the benefit to bring John back? I know it's who are you going to get to replace him? And you're paying a huge buyout, then you're going to have to pay maybe that coach's buyout. I get that. But I'm telling you, the fan base right now I don't even think it's splintered. I'm not sure you can get the most ardent Cal fan to say something nice for him other than, boy, he did some nice things for the program. He sure did. There's no question. But listen, this isn't just a fly-by-night losing to Oakland situation. This is a multitude of years now where this has been a flaming disaster at the end. His stubbornness to change things. And, maybe he groveled to Mitch and said, yeah, okay, all right, if I have to play zone, I'll play some zone. If I have to get rid of Orlando Antigua and Chin, whatever the hell his name is, I'll get rid of those guys and bring in some legit assistant coaches. If you need me to do that, I'll do that. But, boy, I'm telling you, this year was nothing but the pressure cooker to March. That's all this was what is going to happen in March. Listen, there were some bumps along the road in the regular season, but if you'd have told me this was going to be a 3-seed team and we'll race to March, I just said, okay, that sounds probably about right. I think everybody would take that. You're going to get a decent draw, and you got a chance to make a run through the tournament, especially the draw that they wound up getting. And then you flame out again. So what is the benefit to run this back for anybody other than Cal's pocketbook and the fact that they don't want to pay the buyout? And if you to be honest and just say, listen, we don't have the money to do this, that's fine. I'm okay with that too. I would more than understand that. But I'm going to tell you this. Here's what needs to happen. And maybe he doesn't care because Mitch Barnhart's 64 years old. He's marching towards retirement. If this doesn't work out next year, Mitch Barnhart should be fired as well because this decision is his decision now. This wasn't a matter of couldn't afford it, didn't have the money, didn't have the funding. This was his decision to bring John back. And to that point, now it's on you too. The contract's on you as it is. You made your bed with that. But now this decision, you go too.
Yeah, the thing I can't wrap my head around is what is there to get excited about going forward? And how do you, in an era where you have to come up with NIL dollars to put together your roster, how do you get any donors to agree to give you money for John Calipari?
Did you see the La Familia NIL collective that raised like the goal's $1 million? It raised like 48,000. I don't know if this is true or not, but there's a Louisville radio personality, Terry Miners, and he picks at Kentucky. He always has. He's been doing it for 40 years. He's very popular. I think he's actually a very good radio host, but he picks at the Kentucky fan base, and he's good at doing that. But he said, I think after the Oakland win, it had exactly $1 more than it did the day before. $1 more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there's been a lot of talk about how Cal has sort of pushed away a lot of the big time donors, that the traditional donors at Kentucky, the Joe Crafts of the world, like the big name guys that have always been there to support all this stuff. He hasn't been willing to do all the things to make those people feel special and important and everything else. So he has gone out and reached out to his friends and former players with this La Familia thing, and it ain't working, Skinny. They don't really care about UK basketball that much. And the people who do care about UK basketball don't want Cal there and don't want to support him, and they don't want to pay his buyout. It is a disaster. And I'll give you one more point on the buyout. Andy Staples put out a great video on this that said, look, this buyout is about as team friendly as it can possibly be. None of it is owed up front. It's owed over the course of the contract, which is to 2029. So you're only paying, basically his salary per year to pay the buyout if you have to buy him out. And the other part of it is offset by any new job that he would take. So if he were to go get a job at USC or something, let's say if Andy Enfield really leaves and takes the SMU job and he makes $3 million a year there, that $3 million a year comes off what you owe him. So, you could be in a situation where you're only paying Cal an extra $2 million a year or something on top of what you're paying the current coach. And that wouldn't be such a bad situation, but it appears they don't even want to do that.
So what is the benefit to bring him back?
I can't figure that out because I do not know how you sell this to anyone, especially a donor right now who you need NIL money from. How are you going to sell to him? Yeah, we're running it back with Cal. 2 years ago, he had the National Player of the Year returning with Oscar Tshiebwe, Skinny. He had experienced players. He had done it differently. He had brought in transfers. He had brought in shooters, guys who weren't just athletes, and it didn't work. They got embarrassed by St. Peter's.
This was a really good team.
This year, he had insane talent.
You know how cocky I think I am as a coach. I could have done some things with this team. There's a lot of coaches could have done some things with this team. This was a really talented, well put together team from a roster perspective. You had everything you could want. You had slashers, you had shooters, you had downhill drivers, you had bigs, you had everything a coach could want. You had NBA talent, you had everything, and you flame out to Jack Golpe shooting fall away threes.
Multiple lottery picks, several NBA guys, a number one recruiting class, a recruiting class where he went into the top 15, 20-ish players and basically took whoever he wanted, and he got all of them.
And yet you were too stubborn for a team that couldn't defend, and shame on maybe the kids too. But again, for whatever, they couldn't defend, and you were too stubborn to make changes defensively. You were too stubborn to not play your three best players. That analytics, and listen, I'm an old guy too. I don't believe in all analytics. I don't. There's a place for it, but analytics showed you that when Reeves and Dillingham were on the three R's were on the floor together, you were a better offensive team. Some could argue, I haven't seen the defensive metrics. Maybe they were a little bit worse. I don't know how much worse you could be. You were already bad defensively. So let me make ourselves even better offensively. And you were too damn stubborn to do that because why? You promised two guys, you're my guys. I'm going to start you. It was going to hurt feelings. Too bad. That's what coaches have to make tough decisions sometimes.
Yeah, I believe when those three guys that you named were on the floor in the Oakland game, they were +4 in that game.
-8 when at least one of them was out. That doesn't sound like a big differential, but when the winning margin was that, it was a huge differential.
It was the difference in the game, and that's with Reed Sheppard playing as poorly as he's played all year.
Correct, right. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, so I mean, that kind of tells you all you need to know about. It never made sense that he wouldn't play those guys together, and there were other things that were infuriating. Look, if you're an opponent of Kentucky and you're not playing a zone in a must-win scenario, one-game tournament scenario, you should be fired immediately. How many times do we have to see that a zone takes Kentucky out in the tournament? I'm going all the way back to his very first year with that West Virginia team that knocked out John Wall and Boogie Cousins.
You're right.
That had no business beating them. It was a zone that did them in. I mean, that's just the thing. He cannot beat a zone defense in the tournament. So first of all, you start right there.
And no offense, and listen, I know that they kind of match up out of it, but I mean, honestly, put your best attack guy right in the middle of it. Just go attack to the rim from that point forward, and they weren't going to stop you. They just weren't. And that could have been Rob Dillingham for all I would have cared. Put whoever your best attack guy was at that spot, and then if they don't collapse, you're going to the rim one-on-one, and you're going to score because Rob Dillingham's going to score on bigs. I mean, it's not that hard. Put your best guy there.
Yeah. So I think we both agree that we don't see how you can possibly bring Cal back. We don't know how this is going to work. We understand why the fan base is not going to be excited at all about that. But he did make it sound during his radio show the other night, Skinny, like one of his point guards might be coming back, which would seemingly be either DJ Wagner or Reed Shepherd.
I think it would be Reed. I know it sounds odd because he's a lottery pick and this is not a very good draft. And maybe next, I don't look ahead enough in draft classes to what next year's class could be. Maybe he would fall out of the lottery at that point. But I do think there's enough Kentucky in him that's not how he wanted his career to end. Now, maybe that's naive on my point, but I think there's something to that.
Well, and I know it's one game. You can't get too caught up in one game. But if you're an NBA GM and you watched that game Thursday against Oakland, you watched him freeze up and you watched him get just dusted off the dribble for layups in important moments. I know we've talked about it and they still have him in the lottery and they know more than we do in terms of evaluating talent. But do you really see an NBA lottery pick out of that guy right now? I think he's fantastic. I love watching him play.
I do too. He's one of my favorite players to have watched played at any level at any time. And I mean that sincerely. It's not just, to me, he just makes the smart play almost every time. Like I said, I wish there was a hockey assist in basketball because he'd lead the country in it. He's just so good at passing ahead up the floor to get something initiated. He just does everything so smart, in my opinion, other than fouling a guy in the Texas A&M game. But he really does. But I said that earlier in the year when you actually brought that up, and I kind of scoffed at it. I'm like, no, he can't guard anybody. And that didn't change either. And we're talking, NBA guys are going to be a whole lot better off the bounce that he's got to guard than even the college guys he's guarding. So I don't see that part of it either. Again, it may be naive on my part, but I also think the most of the thing for him is there's a lot of Kentucky in him. I don't think he wants it to end that way. And he's probably, of all people, he's going to probably make a big chunk off of NIL. It's not going to offset lottery money and life-changing money, for goodness sakes. But if you're in the lottery this year, I don't think you fall too far out of it if you come back.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the option now is you're thinking, okay, I'm going to make $1 million plus in my 1 year at Kentucky that I stay. If I stay another year, I make $1 million plus, which is pretty damn good money to be in college. And then even if I really slip, I'm still probably getting a guaranteed 2-year NBA contract as a first rounder.
And I don't think I think again, this used to be the natural progression, right? As a freshman, you'd come in and cut your teeth. There was occasionally a rare freshman that would come in and wow and be great. But even those guys, they take that big jump to their sophomore year. And I think he has a better chance to do that than regress.
We'll be talking about him as a first-team All-American and maybe even a National Player of the Year candidate next season if he comes back.
I would agree with that.
I mean, I'm with you. I think he's going to be fantastic. There is always the part of this when a guy is a really talented prospect where we see him long enough when we start to get to the nitpicking stage of it, where we start to point out all the little flaws. But I don't think he's in danger of that. And I'm with you. If he comes back, I think it would, as crazy as it is to pass up on a lottery pick, I think he's one guy where it might make sense to do that. And it seems like Cal feels there's a chance because he was talking like one of the point guards would be back saying, I don't necessarily have to go out in the transfer portal and get an experienced point guard. We might have one coming back. And he said, I'm not going to encourage any of my players to go to the NBA. If they want to come back to Kentucky, we're going to take them back, which was a change in tone from how he's usually been.
Yeah. And I would say from an evaluation process, if one were coming back, it probably would be DJ Wagner because he's not in the lottery at the moment. So it is an interesting answer, but I go back to I think it would be Reed, to be quite frank.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, Skinny, let's move on from Kentucky. We've talked about them enough here.
By the way, I just got a text from somebody as we were doing this. It sounds like Pat Kelsey to Louisville is like this imminent.
Okay, well, I was going to bring that up because that was another thing. This Louisville search has gone off the rails.
Hugs threw his name in.
Hugs publicly, not like there's been the rumors around here that Hugs had been talking to people saying, I'm going to get back in. I might still be the coach at West Virginia. I'm looking for another job. Now it's a real thing nationally. He had publicly endorsed himself for this Louisville job. Obviously, that's not going to happen, but that's a real thing that's out there now that's being talked about. Jody Demling from Cardinal Authority this morning before we started recording had the top 2 names on his hot board for this job, Skinny, were Pat Kelsey, you just talked about, the former Chris Mack assistant at Xavier, former Xavier walk-on, who was the head coach at College of Charleston, and Richard Pitino Jr., who's the head coach at New Mexico, has exactly one NCAA tournament win to his name.
Yeah, and I just bringing that name back to Louisville, that sounded so odd to me. It was like, you're really going to do this?
Why wouldn't you bring back the real Rick Pitino if you're going to bring back one of them? If you're okay with bringing back the family and the name, why not get the one who can actually coach?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, to your point, I mean, Richard Pitino flamed out at Minnesota, did take New Mexico to the tournament this year, but I need to see longer-term success there to know that he's a program builder. Now, listen, I've known Pat since he went to Elder. I covered him in the state finals. That's how old I am. I root for Pat, and he's done great things. He would be a better choice than Richard Pitino, in my opinion, because Pat has done it at two places that, listen, Charleston's had their success, Winthrop's had their success, but he's done it at multiple spots now, and I think Pat's a really good coach. You can argue how he wigged out the UMass situation. I'll give everybody all of those things, and he might wig out this time as well. He might go to the press conference, and everybody go, where'd he go? He might, but I think Pat can flat coach.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that makes him enticing in today's current climate is NIL is so big, and he can fundraise. That's where he's really good at going out, shaking hands, and getting people excited and doing the things you need to do to fundraise. So from that standpoint, I could see why they'd be excited about hiring him. But think about this, Skinny. The two guys that you're now considering for the Louisville job, which a lot of people would tell you is one of the top 5 best jobs in basketball, maybe even top 3, like depending on when you ask this question. You're now looking at potentially hiring Chris Mack's former assistant, the guy that you ran off.
It's a great point.
Or the guy that was going to be your head coach had Rick Pitino never been disgraced and ran out of your because he was trying to set up his son to take over as the head coach once he retired from Louisville down the road.
Yeah.
So that's where you ended up in all of this coaching search. That is crazy to think about. That's where they landed.
And I mean, honestly, Dusty May read something on the walls because he decides to go to Michigan. Listen, can you turn things around at Michigan? You absolutely can. I don't think it's a better job than U of L.
The coach from Florida Atlantic, who basically had one miracle run in the NCAA tournament. And God bless Dusty May for what he's done. I'm not saying he's going to be a bad coach, but let's be honest. A lot of people probably had questions about him even being the head coach at Louisville. He turned it down.
No. He said no.
I don't want it.
Yeah.
I cannot believe Louisville has fallen this far, Skinny. Either people are getting inside, seeing what's under the hood and being like, your leadership is such a disaster. I don't want to touch you guys with a 10-foot pole. Or they really feel that like this rebuild job is so significant. Because my thing with Louisville right now is you're going to get paid insane money. You have all the leverage and the expectations are lower than they've ever been because of Kenny Payne.
Hey, listen, you get him back to the NCAA tournament in 2 years. You've done some great things. I mean, that's a big deal at the moment.
You're going to get an extension. You'll be signed like to a Calipari level contract, and you'll have a $30 million buyout. It's like, why would you not want to be the next head coach at Louisville? But these people are running from it. It doesn't make it's crazy to see. Honestly, this is one of the more interesting college basketball storylines we've had in years. In my opinion.
Agreed.
Maybe since the last time Louisville was in the news, quite honestly.
Yeah, you throw Cal into the mix. It is a weird basketball situation. In fact, Rick Bozich of WDRB.com, former columnist of the Louisville Courier-Journal, wrote a piece of just how disastrous things are. Think of the blue blood Kentucky, Indiana, Louisville triangle and where those programs are at the moment.
Man, seriously, those 3 schools that, and I want them to be good because their fan bases are so enthusiastic and they're so obnoxious. It's better when they're just having fun and winning basketball games and talking about basketball instead of whining all the time. I want those teams to be good, but it has been a tough stretch for them.
And listen, Kentucky fans hate Louisville. Louisville fans hate Kentucky, but they love it when they're both really good because that game when they play really, really matters.
Yes. And it's just like it makes college basketball as a whole matter more. When you don't have the biggest fan bases interested and engaged, the whole sport takes a bit of a hit, and that kind of stinks. Let's get back to the NCAA tournament here. Are you buying the NCAA tournament has been bad so far? That narrative is out there.
No, I think it's been great. I think you've had enough Cinderella sprinkled in. Last year was kind of the outlier where it just all kind of fell apart all at once, and it was fun, but I still want to see the best of the best keep advancing. I mean, if you truth be told, I don't know if I want a Final Four of all ones because I don't like Carolina a whole lot as a team. But if you give me a Final Four of Arizona, UConn, Purdue, and Houston Marquette, whichever one of those, I'll take it. You got 4 legit teams right there, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, Skinny. I mean, the thing that I look at is we already had a few really fun games that played out last. It wasn't the crazy. We didn't get the 16-1 upsets, but that's not always the best thing to get if we're being honest for a good tournament. It's like, yeah, it's a great one moment, but it doesn't set up for the best tournament. We had some great moments in the first weekend, and now we have an ideal bracket set up for us. I mean, look at the Thursday games that we have ahead. Clemson, Arizona, San Diego State, UConn, Alabama.
A rematch of last year. I mean, again, that's probably intentional. They do a really good job of somehow intending to have these matchups at some point. They got to happen, right? The team's got to win to do it. But I mean, how about that matchup?
Oh, it's fantastic. And again, San Diego State is just licking their chops to get that opportunity. Alabama, North Carolina is going to be a really fun game.
Yeah, first one to 100.
And then Illinois, Iowa State, which I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with that game yet. I love this Iowa State team. Illinois has been playing really well, so that's going to be a great matchup. And then you go to Friday.
You got the one Cinderella left in NC State.
NC State Marquette. NC State's been playing so well.
I mean, one of my favorite 30 for 30s is the Jim Valvano one. And that team obviously had to win the ACC tournament that year. They did. Then they survived a bunch of miracle finishes in the NCAA tournament to eventually win. I mean, if this team were to do that, I mean, it is an exact parallel to 40 years ago and what that NC State team did.
Yeah, really. I mean, then you've got Gonzaga, Purdue.
Great game.
Duke, Houston.
Great game.
Different Tennessee.
Styles. I mean, those are all great games.
Every game we have over those next 2 days are going to be just awesome. Awesome days of basketball to watch. Is there a favorite you have out of these 8 games?
Favorite matchup?
Yeah, favorite matchup or one you're most looking forward to watching?
I'm going to go Gonzaga Purdue. I just think it's going to be highly entertaining. And it's finally Zach Edey's going to match up against a center that can at least hold his own, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Illinois, Iowa State.
Yeah, that's a good one too, man.
I have no clue what to pick in that game. I feel like both those teams are playing really well right now.
Well, I'm in a game where you take 8 teams. It's called Pick 8, and you get points for their. So if a 3 seed wins, you get 3 points. If they win again, so I'm in like 8th place, but I think I mapped it out. I got to have some weird stuff happen. I got 4 teams left because some of it is you need to pick some higher seeded teams. Hope they steal 2 wins. Like I picked Grand Canyon, right? But I also had Alabama, so. That game, I probably need, although some people ahead of me, I needed Grand Canyon to actually lose because I needed Alabama to advance. So I've got 2 4 seeds left in Alabama and Duke and 2 3 seeds left in Illinois and Creighton. So I've got legitimate rooting interest in these games and legitimate chances. I don't think Illinois, even if it beats Iowa State, gets through UConn. But I do have a legitimate chance, in my opinion, for Duke to make it to the Final Four, for Bama to make it to the Final Four, for Creighton to make it to the Final Four. I got a big rooting interest this weekend.
All right, so we'll have our eyes on that as well as we're watching these great matchups. I don't know, there's a lot else that I wanted to touch on as it relates to the NCAA tournament, Skinny, but UC, their season came to an end on Tuesday night in the NIT quarterfinals as they lost to Indiana State 85-81. It was a pretty good game. We got to see Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Larry Blurd go to work against the Bearcats.
All the nicknames, all the nicknames he's got.
Yeah, and he lived up to the hype. He was enjoyable to watch in that game. I guess kind of like we did with Xavier last week. What is your takeaway now that we've gotten to the end of this year of Wes Miller's tenure?
The team was about what I thought they were going to be. I mean, the week non-conference schedule bit them in the butt. I thought they were a 5 or 6 win team in the Big 12, and they proved me wrong. They were a legit 7-win team that, truthfully, if you want to look back on it, truth be told, was probably an 8 or 9 win team because the loss to Oklahoma State at home is just inexcusable. Losing to West Virginia on the road, that happens in conference play. So I'm going to say that they probably were 1 win better than what their final record wound up. And that was never going to be an NCAA tournament resume. And so I think what they did in the NIT, you get a couple of home wins out of it and you go play a team that everybody thought should have been in the tournament in Indiana State, right? I think that's the one team that everybody thought, if you had the vast majority of a poll, that was the team I think would have won the poll of which team got snubbed the most. And you played them toe-to-toe on their home floor. And again, I think this team showed great grit and fight. It just wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough talent-wise. And I think that's the part that you need to, if you're a UC fan, swallow hard and hope that West goes and finds a couple of legit dudes in the portal. Yeah,
I guess that is where everyone's attention turns now with any college basketball team this time of year is what are they going to do in the portal? And when you look at his team, I mean, as long as you have Jizzle James coming back.
Yeah, that's in as long as.
As long as, but that goes for everybody anywhere. That doesn't mean I know anything or think anything that he wouldn't, but just saying if you have a really talented freshman, you're always worried.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's a great building block. No question about it to have him back.
Yeah, if you have Jizzle James back, if you bring Dan Skillings back, if you bring Simas Lukosius back, I think that is a pretty good core right there to build around. And I think those guys will get better playing together. I mean, the one thing you have to give Wes Miller is these guys played hard until the end of the season.
Agreed.
They seemed like they really enjoyed playing together. They seemed like they loved being in the NIT and didn't want last night to end the way it did against Indiana State. So I do think, like, if you can keep these guys working together and building together, Skillings, James, and Lukosius, then I think you really have the makings of something. Now, where I think you're right back at square one is you got to build up the front court again. I don't think Aziz Bandago and Jamil Reynolds were the answer at all, and I don't think they will be good enough in a year to be the answer then.
And I don't know if McKinley is a true Big 12 5. Maybe he is. I think he's really talented. He certainly runs the floor great. I didn't get a chance to see him play at Winton Woods. I did see him play at Walnut Hills. That was a fun team to watch. They pressed, and he was at the back of the press, but I love the way he ran the floor and great hands and all those things. But I don't know, is he a Big 12 5?
Well, is he long-term? I'm not sure. But is he as a freshman? I would definitely have my doubts, considering almost every other team is playing with 22 and 23-year-olds out there. It's just really difficult to step in as a young big man now and compete with the transfer portal bigs that everyone has. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean all these transfer portal bigs are good. Look at Xavier and UC this year, for instance, for an example of that. But they are going to be older, bigger, more experienced guys. I think that will make it difficult for Tyler McKinley. And if you're in Wes Miller's situation, you're through year 3 now with no NCAA tournament appearances. Going into next year, I don't know that you can say our plan is like, yeah, we've got a freshman big man that we're relying on to kind of bolster our group and take us to that next level. I mean, the heat is going to be turned up a level next year, Skinny. It was, okay, you got your 1 year in the Big 12. We knew that was going to be a tough transition, but now this is year 4 of you being here, and we didn't make the NCAA tournament the 2 years before you were here either. So this is now, we're looking at potentially 6 straight years of not making the tournament. Something has to give. This is not UC basketball. And that's how next year is going to be approached from a heat standpoint, if you will, around his seat, I think.
Yeah, and sometimes you coach differently because of that hot seat, right? I mean, you're just a different guy, and maybe that's a good thing, and maybe it's not.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to me, though, is they've got to figure out the big man situation in the portal. I think they'll get everything else right. I think the system, the defense, the toughness, everything UC's doing, I think it's in place mostly.
Agreed.
But I do think you need a serious upgrade in the front court.
Especially to your point, if you have enough core guys that return that are A, capable players, and B, to your point, can kind of teach that system and teach that toughness. And this is what we are about, and you're going to learn it from us. I think that's important too. The coach can say it, but the players are the ones that got to drive that stuff.
Definitely. Any other thoughts on college basketball, the NCAA tournament, any of the local teams?
Yeah, the only other one was, and you reported on it, came off of Sean Miller's podcast about Desmond Claude's elbow issue, that I guess he's going to have a procedure done to it. And maybe that was the reason for the poor shooting. And maybe it's, maybe it's the minutes, maybe it's the things you got to do on defense. But, if that was a factor, maybe you do give him a little bit of a pass. I mean, I didn't realize till I crunched numbers, because I wrote a story off the podcast too to put on our website. Well after you had done it on Musketeer Report, but it needed to go up. And so I wrote it, and I knew he shot poorly. I didn't realize just how poorly it was from 3-point range. It was a disaster. It
was really bad. But then you also had like a game like he had in the NIT where he went 5 of 6 from deep. And his shot isn't one that looks broke.
No.
To a point that he would shoot 20%. Not that's there's plenty of guys who have a decent looking stroke that aren't good 3-point shooters. I'm not saying he should be a 35% shooter just because he has a decent looking stroke. But to be a 20% shooter the way he look, it just doesn't add up. And I think the elbow thing is another data point for us. Yes. I would also add in that there were so many instances of him taking tough, maybe even bad 3-point shots because this offense didn't have enough game breaker type of players to make something happen, and he'd get a hand grenade late in the shot clock and be like, go do something. So he'd take a step back 3.
Yeah. And how many free inside outside looks do you think they got this year? Probably not a whole lot.
None.
Yeah.
Almost none. And those are the best 3-point shots, as you know. So I think that has a lot to do with his shooting, but the elbow story that Sean Miller threw out there saying, I don't think it's a big deal, but it is something that when it bothers you, it bothers you. And he was dealing with it throughout the year. He's going to have a procedure on that to get it cleaned up. I thought that was interesting. And it's also interesting because there have been these rumors about Des Claude potentially testing the transfer portal and wanting more out of Xavier. And to hear Sean Miller talk about him like he did, bring up that in the pod, it felt like we were kind of pushing it towards Desmond Claude will be back at Xavier next year. At least that was the takeaway I got from what he was saying.
Xavier lost 4 in the portal, 5.
They have 5 in the portal right now. If you want to add Logan Duncombe, who obviously wasn't on the team this year, he sat out. He has now been added to the portal as well. But yeah, so there are 5 guys that played for last year's team that are now currently in the portal.
All right, I'm not going to poke fun at this, but it made me shake my head. I think you and I talked. We actually had a fun time on Friday. We went and had some beers and watched NCAA tournament games at Smoke Justice. Had a very enjoyable time watching games in the afternoon session. But we're talking about Marquez Warwick, and I asked you, I said, do you think he goes in the portal? And you said, yeah, I do. No offense. I mean, the declaring of the NBA draft, I get it. I guess it's procedural, but I mean, is he even on a draft board? And I'm not trying to be mean with that. It struck me as it felt like me announcing for the NBA draft.
No, but all these guys do that. And the biggest thing is there is some level of data and feedback that you get from going into the draft. Maybe, I don't even know if you can now do workouts. I think the timing of that has been screwed up to where you don't even really have enough time to go to teams and do workouts for them anymore. You used to be able to do that. You'd declare for the draft, you'd go work out for teams, and then you'd withdraw and return to college after getting some really good feedback. Now you don't get all that, but you do at least get some extra feedback from teams. You find out, hey, am I a prospect for next year? Would you bring me in for a workout next summer if I enter the draft for real? I don't think he has any real expectations of going to the NBA this year. I think he's going to cash in through NIL, one more year of college at the high major level, and then go from there. It is interesting. Both UC and Xavier have already reached out and seem to be recruiting him a little bit. So we'll continue to track that one. I mean, everyone wants the best for the kid from NKU.
No
I know
question.
that.
And I do too. I do too. I got a chance to coach against him in AAU, and we shared a laugh over that one time. And I do root for the kid, no question. Sometimes I see those things, I'm like, seriously, dude, are you really even an NBA draft prospect? But I guess, to your point, I mean, it does give you some data points. One other note was the whole last Sunday, or 2 Sundays ago, I guess it was Selection Sunday, they were not credible reports, but there was some smoke and fire of Chris Mack maybe going to Vandy. That is obviously since come and gone because Vandy has filled its head coaching vacancy. And you start looking around the landscape of it, and I don't know where Chris lands, if he lands somewhere, unless he goes backwards. And I don't think he has aspirations to go backwards into a mid-major situation. Do you?
I'm a little surprised that he wasn't the hire at Vanderbilt, and maybe he looked at it and thought that's a tough place to win. I don't know that I want to get back in at Vandy. Maybe for what they were offering, it wasn't enough to offset the risk of taking a job like that for him. I really don't know. I don't have any insight onto what played out there over those final days, but it did seem like he was very much a target of theirs for that job. And I thought it would have been an absolute home run hire for them.
Me too.
And for him personally, it seemed like it worked out because his daughter is going to play volleyball there.
Right, correct. Yeah.
I don't know where he ends up now, Skinny. It doesn't seem like there are any obvious fits for the jobs that are currently open. I know he's living down in Florida right now. The Florida Atlantic job an option? I don't. Would he want to go back to that level? I don't know.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, that's actually very interesting. Get your feet wet again. Maybe maybe.
It seems like a lower level than he would want to go to, but maybe it's convenient for him.
I will say. It would shock me more that Vandy went otherwise from him than him going otherwise from them, because he is a proven winner. You can argue what happened at the end of Louisville all you want. He had them number 1 in the country at one point. Their last high point in basketball. Did obviously great things at Xavier. I always caution this, and I cautioned it when Kentucky hired Billy Clyde Gillespie. And it's the flavor of the month coach. And I don't know this guy from James Madison. I know what he did this year with this team, but I always think that's a knee-jerk hire a lot of, saw guy in tournament. Guy won game in tournament. He's going to be a great fit for us. Is he? I mean, did he build something at James Madison, or did he just have one of those, put together a really good group? We had a really good run and all those things. I always caution the flavor of the month coach guy.
Chris Mack has been to multiple second weekends of the NCAA tournament. He's been to the Elite Eight. This dude has done things at a high level. And by the way, he's done them at Xavier while competing in the Big East, while they were making the transition to the Big East. He's done it in a hard place to do. I mean, I know everyone wins at Xavier for the most part, but it's not easy to make that transition into the Big East and continue to have the type of success. Get the number 1 seed, which is maybe the hardest thing to do in all of college basketball. He was able to accomplish at Xavier. Chris Mack has done some real things as a coach. And if you're getting Mark Byington over him from James Madison, I don't know. I'd feel pretty bad about that as a fan base personally if we had the chance to get Chris Mack and we didn't.
Agreed.
All right, Skinny, real quick, let's get through some Bengals/NFL stuff. I think the big news of the week from an NFL standpoint was the rule change that we heard about. The NFL league meetings happened in Orlando. The first big point of emphasis was they banned the hip drop tackle, which if you've heard the conversations about it this year, we saw it with Logan Wilson on one of his tackles against the Ravens, I think it was. But
Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews.
Yeah, Mark Andrews. It's essentially where you kind of wrap the guy up around the waist and then just throw your body immediately to the ground and pull them down with you. And there have been some terrible injuries that have occurred from it, but it's a violent sport. We play the sport. It's going to be punished with a 15-yard penalty and an automatic first down. Skinny, what are your thoughts there?
Twofold. The NFLPA was against it. And listen, if they don't think it's a major safety issue, if they thought it was a major safety issue, I think they would have thrown their wholehearted support behind it. I just think it makes it harder. It's hard enough to tackle now. You can't tackle too high. You can't tackle too low. I understand you're trying to make them tackle at the midsection. These dudes are shifty, moving all over the place. It's not easy to grab them, tackle them, whatever. Sometimes you have to just get them and throw them down. Sometimes I don't think people do that. Listen, I would tell you, I know Ravens fans think Logan Wilson is a dirty player. Logan Wilson is the furthest thing from a dirty player. It was a legal play. He made it legally. It's maybe the only way to bring a guy the size of Mark Andrews to the ground in that situation. It's called tackle football. You want to outlaw tackling altogether? Fine. We'll change the whole sport if you'd like. But to me, I think it's going to be hard to legislate. I think because, again, you're putting more subjectivity onto the referees in a game that's already scrutinized and criticized from an officiating standpoint, and you're going to put another subjective call onto this? Stop. Just stop.
It's going to be a disaster from an enforcement standpoint.
And again, if we care about safety, and I mean this sincerely, I know I'm not the only one on this crusade, and you'll agree with it. The Sunday to Thursday thing is just the most asinine thing. People, I'm in that locker room. I know what those guys go through, and I know what they go through, and I don't even know what they go through. I'm just telling you, there's no recovery time to get ready to play again on a Thursday. That is absolutely almost inhumane. Now we're going to throw 2 Wednesday Christmas games on top of everything. Yay, midweek football. I mean, stop with the safety stuff. Just stop, because you're a bunch of liars and hypocrites.
I couldn't agree more with that. But from an enforcement standpoint, Skinny, it's going to be so uneven how they call. Like, you know why I know this? Because try to explain to me what a hip drop tackle is right now in clear verbiage.
It's literally to your point of a guy grabbing a guy and you drop down, you drop with him. And again, that's a tackle. I mean, that's a tackle. Right,
like, think about what we just said. I tried to explain it, then you tried to explain it. Anyone listening is like, what the hell are you talking about when you like it sounds like a tackle, to your point. It doesn't sound like anything. I don't know how the hell you're going to actually officiate this in an even way to where it's like both teams are getting it called the same amount of time. It's just not going to work. And then the best part is you're going to have a major injury occur on a hip drop tackle. That's not going to be called a penalty. And then we're going to be like, this is stupid.
Right. Well, remember when the enforcement of the too much weight on a quarterback when sacking them, that was a thing for a while. And then they're like, wait a minute, this is too hard to enforce. Let's just stop. I mean, stop trying to invent rules to maximize the safety of the game. Listen, it's an unsafe game. I don't want anybody to get hurt. I don't want anybody to suffer a catastrophic injury. These guys chose that. They're well compensated for that. No one is saying you better go play football. I mean, and again, I'm not trying to be inhumane myself. I get you're trying to make things as safe as possible, but there's some things you cannot legislate to make it safe.
Right. And it's like, don't get me wrong, that I know the hip drop thing that they're talking about. I've seen it. I've seen it get rolled up, like guys get rolled up and you see the knee go out or whatever. And it's terrible. I see, and I say, oh man, that's
more of. I think you're going to see more of when tight ends, especially those guys of that size, when they catch and turn up field, you're going to watch more guys cut guys, and it's going to lead to more knee injuries, in my opinion.
It could very well, but that's unfortunately there are realities of this sport, and sometimes you're going to get injured. And I think that's what every player looks at the hip drop tackle as. It's like, it sucks. It can create devastating injuries, but it is a part of our game that it's going to be impossible to really take it out when that's just a normal way to tackle somebody and an impossible rule to enforce. The other rule that they added, and this is another one where it's like, I'm not against the rule, but there is absolutely no way for me to explain it other than saying they have made major rule changes to how the kickoff is going to work. And I will put this up on video, Skinny. If you have a better way to explain what they're doing, you go ahead and try, but I will play the video here that people can see. This is from the XFL.
All right, now freeze it. Can you freeze it, Rick?
Yep.
Okay. So the kick coverage team there is lined up at the 30-35. The blocking group, it's called the safety zone, is lined up at the 30. The guys on the kickoff cannot move that are covering the kickoff until the kickoff returner catches it.
Yeah, and to be clear, the ball is still being kicked from the opposite 35. So all these guys are lined up way ahead of the kicker now.
So one of the things that this does, this looks odd, and I get why it looks odd because we've never seen it before unless you've watched this league. This minimizes that whole 30-plus, 40-plus yard rush down the field to where there's collisions and concussions. That's why a
car crash.
Yeah, they tried to outlaw the whole. That's why they're trying to minimize the concussions. And this seems to be a nice compromise to bring the kickoff return back in the game, because if you kick it in the end zone for a touchback, it comes all the way out to the 35. I think it's a great rule. There was one proposal of kicking off from the opposing 20, which again, kickers have gotten so good. I mean, honestly, almost all of them, if they want to kick it out of the end zone, can. Remember last year they tried the fair catch rule. That didn't work. Teams just said, to hell with it. We're just going to kick it through the end zone. I mean, it was funny. Covering games, Paul Dehner Jr. sits next to me, laughs every time. So when a scoring play happens, I'll write a running game story. So I'll type that up real quick while there's the TV timeout's going on. And I won't even look up during the kickoff. I go, yep, here comes another exercise in futility. Man kicks ball, men run downfield, men run to sideline, play over. And I look up, I go, yep, that just occurred again. Boy, what a thrilling play that is. It really was just a waste of time with the kickoff. I think this is a great rule change. I think it appeases those that want safety, and it brings an exciting play back into fruition, the kickoff return.
I totally agree. So I'll let this play here, but the kickoff had become a disaster. And for legit reasons. It was unsafe. There are real reasons to take it out of the game. I think it made sense that they had made changes to it. But to your point, it had become a totally obsolete part of the game that basically needed to either be eradicated or fixed. And I think this is a good attempt to fix it. We've already seen it work in the XFL. You are clearly going to get more players to return the ball in this. So it is going to be back into the game. And just looking at how it operates, it's like, well, there are going to be way fewer injuries because there's way the impact and the collision is way less significant. And also there looks like there's an opportunity for that guy to break through. I mean, he's got options. Anytime there's something new, teams are going to get innovative with it. And I'm fascinated to see what teams do.
Yeah. And a lot of times you'll put two kick returners back where now there's just one, but now because you're going to probably have more directional kicks to try to at least get one to a corner to where you pin a guy to a sideline. You don't want to kick it down the middle of the field. You never really want to do that, but I think you'll see more directional kicking. That's why you'll have two returners back there. But I think, again, the other part to it is, listen, Evan McPherson, if he wants to, unless there's a heavy wind in his face or he occasionally doesn't hit one right, can kick it through the end zone every time he wants to kick one through the end zone. Well, that sounds all well and good, except for now the ball comes out to the 35. So now you've also added field position into play. And so even that wasn't a great return, but as you saw, he crossed the 30. So they're starting field positions the 32. I think this is where he wound up. And I think that's the other thing. They want to bring, obviously, more scoring to the game, not only with a potential scoring play here, but then better field position than starting even at the 25. I mean, if you're starting with an extra first down, if you're starting at the 35, that probably honestly wasn't a very good kick return, and they're still starting at the 32.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's going to be fun. And you're also like, this is the other thing, bring me back like the Devin Hesters of the world, the Dante Halls. There are going to be returners again for sure.
And I asked Darren Simmons at the Combine because he's on the committee, and that actually became a kind of a story. We're talking to him about that. And he said, listen, this past year, there are some guys who make their living off special teams play. And he brought up Akeem Davis-Gaither, who obviously got re-signed by the Bengals, Marcus Bailey, those guys. And yeah, to your point, some guys who used to just be Josh Cribbs was really just a kick and punt returner, and he was a really good one. Devin Hester didn't play a lot of defense, but was a Hall of Fame kickoff returner, punt returner. You saw what the Steelers maybe did yesterday in signing Cordero Patterson, because what was he before he became kind of that all-purpose weapon in Atlanta as a running back, whatever? He was a great kickoff returner. And I think that brings an exciting part in the game. And it, again, from an NFLPA perspective, it allows you, like, the designated hitters become a big thing in baseball because it extends guys' careers sometimes. And that's a good thing. They think it's a good thing. I think this helps add more guys. I mean, if you don't need a kickoff return on your roster, you go, well, the hell with that. I'm not keeping the fifth running back. I'm going to keep an extra whatever. And so, yeah, I think it's a great rule change. The two rule changes I think that have been really positive in the NFL over the last few years was the moving the extra point to make that meaningful, because it's now not automatic. Guys make it more times than not, but it's not automatic any longer. And
it's played out a few times where it matters.
It's played out a few times, no question about it. And obviously then bringing the kickoff return back. And I'm glad that they did this.
I'm glad too. Shout out to Kewan Ratliff. I don't know what he's doing right now, but maybe we can find him doing something. All right. We had a few other things Bengals related, but none of them are time sensitive, and we've been going on for so long. Let's skip on to a few Ask Skinny Anything questions to wrap this up. What is Skinny's favorite ballpark menu item?
Oh, I'm just a traditional peanut hot dog guy. I know when the ballparks do all these fancy things every year, the Reds are pretty good at that, inventing new foods and whatnot. That's just, I'll be honest with you, I don't go to the ballpark to eat. I really don't. I mean, give me a bag of peanuts and a cold beer, and I'm pretty much good for the day.
Yeah, beer-flavored beer. And as we've discussed, you don't even really like doing that at the ballpark. You like to do that beforehand.
Correct. I mean, listen, I'm not a cheapskate, but I just think it's asinine to spend $10 for a beer when I can get buzzed up at the Grail, sit the game, and then not drink for a couple hours and go have a couple more and go home. It's not hard.
Yeah. Not that we're doing free ads, but by the way, shout out to Holy Grail for a bar. They have fantastic food.
Yes, they do. So too does Smoke Justice where we went and watched the game. You crushed whatever it was you had the other day there. Yeah,
that was fantastic. I actually did the fish and chips at Smoke Justice, but which is not my usual there. But Holy Grail, I did the Philly steak wrap, and that was great too.
Nice.
How many MLB stadiums has Skinny been to, and what is his favorite?
All right, let me think about this. Been to both. Well, I've not been. It's funny. I in New York, I went to old Yankee Stadium before they actually renovated it in the 70s. Not even the new version, the old one before they renovated that one. I went to Shea Stadium as a kid. One of my first games I think I can recall going to. My dad and I went to a Mets-Phillies game in 1971. I've been to the one. I've been to Pittsburgh's. I've been to Tampa's. I haven't been. I was at the old Ranger Stadium. I've been to Royal Stadium. I've been to Anaheim Stadium before they renovated it. I've not been to Seattle's. I've been to Old Candlestick and been to the new ballpark in Frisco. I was in the old Jack Murphy, but not the new ballpark in San Diego. Been to Busch Stadium. Been to Wrigley. Not going to Comiskey. I went to Old Tiger Stadium. I have not been to the new one at Comerica, although it's funny because Ford Field is literally right next door and you can see right into it. I was in the old Atlanta Stadium 2 Atlanta stadiums ago. So I haven't made my way back around. It feels like I've been in a lot of stadiums that were
the old ones.
Correct. Yeah. Not a lot of the current ones, but I've been in a chunk. So never been to Fenway. Fenway's the bucket list one I've not done.
Which is your favorite out of them?
Wrigley. I mean, it's still to this day that I've done in Wrigley and behind home plate, down the right field line, down the third base line. And honestly, one of the trips we took, a client trip years ago when I was doing talk radio, was we did the rooftop once. That was really, really cool.
Yeah, that would be great. Which of Coach Cal's upsets is Skinny's favorite?
I'll go this one just because I just love watching the way Jack Golke shot the ball. It was so great. It was literally guy at the Y who got hot in a pickup game. That's what that was.
Also, we got to give some credit to Jack Golke. Like, Kentucky should have done something different earlier for sure. But some of the threes he was hitting in that game, they were doing everything they could to chase him around screens, and he was just red dotting them.
And listen, there was probably a shot to maybe say we're just going to automatically switch it and get him on the catch and make him put it on the deck. That's probably the adjustment that should have been made.
Yeah, run 2 at him, whatever.
Yeah, he doesn't want to put it on the deck as we know by his 2-point shots. But to your point, there were a couple off the curl. I'm like, no, you're not. Oh, yeah, you are. Bang. Holy cow.
And he has such incredible range too. Yes. I mean, he gets off quick with range. Like, he's a special shooter. There aren't a lot out there like him.
I think in the 2 games, he was obviously colder in the loss to NC State, but I think he went 16 for 37. Does that sound right in the 2 games?
I think that sounds right. Yeah. And I mean, crazy. Again, this is not like a fluke for him or the way they play. Right. They shot 53s at a game against NKU this year, and he took like 17 of them or something. I don't know. Finally, we'll wrap it up with this, Skinny. Where did you go for spring break trips when you were a teenager?
I didn't, because I was playing baseball.
So you never took a spring break trip during high school or college?
College, I did. College, my last year, it was actually my favorite trip. Went to Phoenix, and it was Kentucky made the NCAA tournament by the skin of their teeth. They were this was the 1985 tournament, because it was the year that actually when we came back, that was the year I went to the Final Four because Kentucky Rupp hosted it. I won a lottery to buy tickets to the Final Four. But that year, that trip, take it back. No, this was the 84 tournament. Kentucky got in by the skin of their teeth, whatever it was. No, it was 85. I'm so sorry. I'm backtracking. 84, Kentucky went to the Final Four. It was the 85 tournament. Got in by the skin of their teeth, pulled off an upset of Washington in the first round. It was a Washington team that had Detlef Schrempf and Christian Welp. And Christian Welp was a pretty good big, and Detlef Schrempf obviously had a great NBA career. It was a really good Washington team. So we're in Phoenix, and my wife and I were dating at the time. We were on the trip together, and I said, they don't have the game on here, and they were getting ready to play UNLV in round 2. I said, you want to go to Vegas for a couple days? And she's like, yeah. So we somehow found a cheap flight on Northwest Orient of all airlines, flew to Vegas, watched the Kentucky game in an airport bar because we got there literally right before tip, went down, did the whole Vegas thing for a couple days, flew back to finish our vacation in Phoenix. That's clearly because it's really the only one I really took. I was always, again, my springs were just, I don't know why they were busy, but they were busy. I don't know why in college they were busy, but they were busy.
So you knew your wife in college?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you guys did that long. You dated in high school?
Yes.
Wow. So when did you guys first start dating?
Senior year.
Junior year. And so how many years?
Senior year.
Senior year. How long have you been together now?
That would make it 43.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that.
So sure.
I feel like I didn't know that, or I've forgotten it if I did.
That was a pretty cool trip. That was actually pretty cool. I will say that's where I was still gambling. The night we were there, I was on like the first Vegas buzz, right? You're like, I'm going to just be an idiot here. And she was a pretty good we had not gotten a hotel room at that point. It was like 5 a.m. And so she fell asleep in like a lounge, and she got rousted by a cop for thought some stumblebum had fallen asleep in the lounge.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you got the full Vegas experience.
Got the full Vegas experience, and got a chance to see Kentucky win. And then they turned around and lost to really good St. John's team in the Sweet 16. That was actually Joby Hall's last game. No, that was Joby Hall's fault. No, actually, he got a team that wasn't very good to the Sweet 16, which shows you know what? Even when your team isn't very good, you can coach them to this. You're allowed to be good enough to coach them to the Sweet 16. Cal.
And with that, that's all we got.
All right, very good. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. Thanks for being with us. We'll be back next week. It's the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.